our co-dean of Rutgers Law School, Dean Ron Chen.
Thank you, Professor Luzor, and good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased on behalf of the current co-dean, David Lopez, who unfortunately, I believe, is required to be in Camden location tonight, to welcome you all here to the first inaugural Distinguished Immigration and Citizenship Lecture. There aren't many issues that are more at the forefront of discussion, contemporary discussion, than the way that we include immigrants to the American community and culture. There are really several narratives that come into play on this subject, not always consistent. The first narrative that we learn in civics classes, that America is a nation of immigrants, and that immigrants continuously revitalize our community, both socially and economically, is one that we historically take great pride in. That is particularly true here in New Jersey, which has one of the highest per capita immigrant communities among the 50 states. 22% of New Jerseyans are immigrants. Another 16% are children of immigrants, including me. So this dialogue is one that has great resonance in this state and the nation. There is the other narrative that we all know about, that I won't say as regular as clockwork, but certainly periodically there come times in our nation's history in which immigrants are at the receiving end of criticism and, one might say, other forms of unfair characterization in reaction to circumstances that almost always they have absolutely nothing to do with, starting with the reaction to the Irish immigration in the 1840s and 1850s, the backlash against Chinese immigration that led to the enactment of the Chinese Exclusion Act, the reaction against Southern and Eastern European immigrants that led to the restrictive immigration laws just after World War II, and the forced repatriation of Mexican and Americans of Mexican descent in the 1930s, Japanese internment, and during World War II, and of course most recently reaction against immigrants from Central and South America, and also certainly since 9/11 reaction against immigrants from the Middle East or from Muslim majority countries. Reconciling those two sometimes conflicting narratives explains why law is particularly a useful discipline in which to, frankly, try to reconcile those two narratives. I'm very proud to say that here at Rutgers Law School, we have for many years been at the forefront with our triple mission of teaching, scholarship, and service, tried to address these issues. At least two of our clinics, indeed many of our clinics, the Immigrants' Rights Clinic, the Child Advocacy Clinic, have represented immigrants and immigrant issues in their work, particularly dealing with immigrant children. I'm also very pleased that with the arrival of Professor Luzor, we now have instituted the Center for Immigration, Law, Justice, and Policy, which for this inaugural lecture is the first event. We are particularly pleased to have as the inaugural lecturer Jose Antonio Vargas. His biography is in the handout, but let me just briefly note that which is in there. Mr. Vargas is a Pulitzer-prize winning journalist, Emmy-nominated filmmaker, and a leading voice for the human rights of immigrants, and the founder and CEO of Define American, the nation's leading nonprofit media and cultural organization that fights injustice and anti-immigrant hate through the power of storytelling. In 2011, the New York Times published his groundbreaking essay in which he revealed and chronicled his life in America as an undocumented immigrant, and a year later he appeared on the cover of Time magazine worldwide with fellow undocumented immigrants as part of a follow-up cover story. He produced and directed Documented, a documentary feature film on his undocumented experience, and his memoir, Dear America, Notes from an Undocumented Citizen, which I believe are available nearby, was published this fall by HarperCollins. So it is my great pleasure to introduce our inaugural lecturer, Antonio Vargas.
Thank you so much for having me here. The first thing I want to say is, as a proud Filipino, I'm not sure how many other Filipinos there are in the country who are leading Center for Immigration Law, Policy, and Justice, so I really just want to give one more round of applause to Rose. Wherever she asks me to go, even though she is incredibly, exceedingly patient with me, which is not like Filipinos at all. So I give her much credit for that. I am still in the middle of a never-ending book tour that started on September 18th. Where are we now? November 14th. So I've been on the road since then. This is my 45th book event in the past 2 months. And yeah, been all over the country, all places in Ohio, was in Mississippi for a few days. But I'm really, really happy to be in New Jersey and incredibly honored to give this inaugural lecture, which is really fitting because, as you can see here, the word citizen is on the cover. It's underlined. A lot of people on Breitbart and conservative news media don't like the fact that now I'm claiming to be a citizen without understanding kind of the irony of why I'm using the term. And to give you some more background about why I wrote this book, there are people here like my friend Giancarlo who I've known now for 7 years since this journey started. I'm getting really tired of talking about myself. Because, you know, I spent so much of my career as a journalist talking and writing about other people. And in the past 7 years, I've had to really kind of talk about myself in a way that allows other people to see the issue bigger than just one person and bigger than just an issue. Because, you know, I'm not a walking immigration reform law that hasn't been passed, right? Like, we are more than just whatever struggles we face. And so what happened was, after the election of Donald Trump, I was living in downtown LA. Ever since I was a kid and I saw the show Frasier, I wanted to have Frasier's house. You know that big house, 1 floor, just never stops, never ends? So I had one of those places. It was actually Ray J's place. You know Ray J? The one who made Kim Kardashian famous? So he and his wife, Princess Love, who's half Filipina, was living in this apartment and they broke the lease and someone had to take over. I saw the apartment, I took over. I had just made a film called White People for MTV and made money from that. And I was like, okay, that's it. I'm finally gonna get my Frasier apartment. It was 2,500 square foot that could fit all 36 of my Filipino relatives in it. And half of them decided to sleep after, during Thanksgiving. So I had this big ass apartment. And then about 3 weeks after Trump was elected president, the building manager texted me and said, hey, Jose, I'm not sure what we would do if ICE showed up in the building. You may want to find a new place. So why is he texting me? So I went on the 4th floor where he was at, and I'm like, yo, the rent's paid on time. I can pay for the rest of the year if you need me to. Like, what's going on? He was like, well, you know, I just don't know how safe you would feel. And then I started realizing, oh, it's actually not even about me. It's about how safe they feel about having me in the building. So I packed everything I owned, which was a lot. I love furniture. And then I put everything in storage, and then I started writing this book, which originally I wanted to write a book about global migration, because I can't leave the country, and I hadn't left the country since I was 12. I figured this was a time to actually leave. At least I can leave with my mind, and write about what migration means in Europe, and how is it that there's apparently 258 million migrants in the world, and many of us are migrating to countries that previously colonized and imperialized us. So how does Sweden, France, Germany, how are they going to welcome people? How are they welcoming people? Are they welcoming people? So I wanted to do that, and then my editor was like, no, we're not doing that book. And then he said, and then she said, her, Julia Shepitz, she asked me to list the top 20 most painful experiences of my life. Which was awful. Although, in retrospect, I highly recommend it to people. I've never seen a therapist. It was like so therapeutic to write all down. And then, when we were going through the list, it became very apparent that everything I wrote about was about lying, passing, or hiding. I was either lying to someone or people, or trying to pass to someone else, or hiding. Right? So then that gave us the structure. So part one, lying. The lie of coming here. I thought I was coming here to be with my grandparents when I was 12. And then when I was 16, found out that the green card that my grandfather had given me was actually fake when I went to the DMV. And then that's when I realized that actually the whole thing was a lie, that they smuggled me here for $4,500, which is a lot of money for a security guard, which is my grandfather. And then another lie they wanted to do was, my grandfather's plan was, I was supposed to marry a woman, a US citizen, while working as a janitor at the flea market, right? Where his brother was working under the table. That was the plan. That was the lie. And I thought it was interesting that I had to lie more to support his lie. Because at the time I also found out that I was gay because of AOL chat rooms. It's like a pre-Tinder AOL chat rooms. So found out that I was gay because of AOL chat rooms. And then I told my grandfather, who's Catholic, Frank Sinatra listening, karaoke singing My Way kind of guy, that I'm gay and I'm not going to go marry a woman just so I can correct his lie. Wonder how well that went. Kicked me out of the house. But then his lie became my lie when I started to work. You know when you get an employment form, you have to check a box. And I was, in the book, I actually put this in the book and my lawyers did not see it until after I wrote the book. But in the book, I detailed the first time I ever lied on a government form claiming to be a US citizen, because that was the only way I'd get a job. You know, in the form, it actually says perjury. But you know, I didn't have Google at the time. There were no iPhones, so I couldn't just Google perjury. But I know that it sounded bad, but I wanted the job. So I checked the box, and years later, I found out that actually falsely claiming US citizenship is one of the highest offenses you could ever make, right? And one lawyer said to me, the fact that you lied and claimed to be a US citizen when you're not, actually may be the reason why you might never become a US citizen. I lied in all the forums, at the San Francisco Chronicle, at the Washington Post, at the New Yorker, where I work. So I lied in all the forums, right? And that's part of the lying, but a big part of it is actually passing, right? So the first time I found out and realized I was here as an undocumented immigrant, the first thing I did was get rid of my big Tagalog accent, which is kind of like that. And how I got rid of it? Bill Moyers on PBS and Dr. Dre. I figured if I would sound white and black, no one was going to think that I'm not supposed to be here, right? And out of that passing, which I would argue that a big part of US history is actually just all of us trying to pass, was hiding, right? Some small things, like, you know, when I was at the Washington Post for 5 years, I never put any photos of any family members in my office. We put photos, people ask questions, right? When the Washington Post foreign editor said, hey, we want to send you to Baghdad, to cover the war in Iraq in 2005, I had to lie about why I couldn't go. And I said, oh, you know, I grew up overseas. I don't need to see Baghdad. And then he looked at me and he was like, there's two ways to matter at the Washington Post. Become a foreign correspondent or become a political reporter. Oh, I'll be a political reporter. I was 26. And he was like, how are you going to be a political reporter? Oh, I'll be a political reporter. I'll do it. You just keep passing. And I don't know, all those years that I was working at the Washington Post, I'm surprised why no one ever wondered where I was from. Is it because I talk the way that I talk? Is it because I don't sing? Some people would say, oh, you sound so Californian. I'm like, yep, I'll totally pass. Now. And then when you hide, I didn't realize this at the time, but until I actually wrote the book, you don't just actually hide from the government, which I was doing in plain sight. You know, I was working in DC. In post 9/11 America, you couldn't enter a government building without an ID. And somehow, whenever a source said to me, hey, you know, like you should go and meet me at the Department of Justice, I'd be like, there's a Caribou Coffee across the street. Can you just meet me at the coffee shop? Because I knew that the moment I would enter the building, what ID would I show them? Right? And then I didn't realize that all those years that you hide, you end up actually hiding from yourself. Right? Now, immigration, as you all know, is the most talked about, yes, the least understood issue in American life today. And I say this as someone who I've been about 1,200 events in 49 states and visited 400 colleges in the past 7 years. I have not declined every invitation I've ever had with conservatives or Tea Party people. I try to make sure that I talk to Republicans as much as I talk to Democrats. And I'm always aghast when my own colleagues in journalism say, why can't you just get legal? Right? It's just incredible to me. I said getting legal is like flipping off a switch. Right now, there's only 4 ways for me to actually adjust my status. 1, a pardon from the president. 2, a private bill, meaning that I would ask a Congress member or a senator to actually introduce a private bill just to save me. What does that say to 11 million undocumented people in this country, that I'm more worthy than they are? Because why? I work for the Washington Post. Who cares? 3, immigration reform of any sort, which might provide some sort of immunity for all the fraud and all the laws I had to break, which many of us had to do just so we can find work. Those are the 3 easy ways, easy being relative. The 4th is leave, right? Self-deport, Mitt Romney style. And thanks to what Bill Clinton signed into law, if I leave, we would face what's called a 10-year bar, and there's no guarantee to return. As I see it, Trump's election and governance are the culmination of all the lies and myths and delusions that we told ourselves about how we came to be and who we actually are. A country founded on the plunder and genocide of native indigenous people, built on the labor of imported African slaves, and constantly replenished by new generations of immigrants who, from the very beginning, have always tried to keep other immigrants out. It's no accident that those white supremacists carrying torches from Walmart, what were they saying as they were marching down the University of Virginia in Charlottesville? One nation, one people, and immigration. I like numbers. So everybody here knows what DACA is, right? 800,000 DACA recipients, part of the 11 million total undocumented population. What most people don't know is that there are 43 million immigrants in America today. 43 million in total. 11 million of whom are undocumented. According to the Pew Research Center, those 43 million people will constitute 88% of the total US population growth in the next 50 years. I don't know what's happening. White people are not having as many babies as you all used to have. Black people have kind of stayed a little, hidden. But Latinos and Asians are having lots and lots of babies. But if you think about that, this is a country that can barely have a conversation about race in America, that has a panic attack over calling Kaepernick, kneeling. If we can't even handle that, how are we going to handle this? Now, to provide even more context, right? In the United States, between 1776 and 1963, 42 million immigrants migrated here, right? That's the Ellis Island era. 1 out of 3 Americans can trace their ancestors in Ellis Island. Now, between most of those people, by the way, the 42 million people are mostly white people from Europe who got to this country as Latvians, Irish, Germans, and Italians, but all just became this thing called white. right? Now, between 1966 and 2016, because of the Immigration Nationality Act, 43 million immigrants moved here. So think about this. In a span of 187 years, 42 million people. And in a span of 50 years, 43 million people. Is it a surprise that we are where we are? Like, this is a lot of change in a country that's always been kind of resistant to change. And when it comes to immigration, we have been so distracted by partisan politics and often inscrutable policies that we're not even asking the most basic questions. Questions like, why do people move? Right? We are here. The reality is, U.S. foreign policy and trade agreements have impact migration patterns. I was in North Carolina a few years ago. I was doing a Tea Party event, and I ended up saying that there are 4 million Filipinos in the United States, many in New Jersey, as you all know. And then this man got up and said, "Why are there so many of you here?" And all I could say was, "Sir, we are here because you were there. We are here because you were the Spanish-American War, when you took over the Philippines and we became a protectorate of the United States. So all those Central Americans right now in the caravan, why are they coming here? What did we do in the 80s, right? Who did Reagan side with during the communist era, right? Like, who started the drug war? What did NAFTA do to Mexico? The reality is, people coming to the United States, the reasons are far more complicated than the Statue of Liberty or the American dream. Right? People are coming here because of the push-pull factor in migration. And the fact that you cannot erase and separate migration and why people move from the foreign policies and economic policies of this country. Now, more interestingly, at least for me, I find it so interesting that when white people move, it's courageous. It's necessary. What do we call it? White man's burden. Manifest destiny. Yet when white people move, when people of color move, what's the question? Is it legal? Is it a crime? Now, since we are talking about legality, I think we have to remember that in this country, our own history shows us that legality has always been the construct of power, right? I don't know if you know this, the first time this country determined who could be a U.S. citizen was in 1790, when we determined, right, that an applicant of U.S. citizenship had to be a free white person of good moral character. The first ever groups of people who could be American citizens were free white men. Isn't it fascinating that we are living in this movement of movements? The Black Lives Matter movement, the LGBT rights movement, the Me Too movement, right? And all of that has had to do, I would argue, what connects all those movements to each other is a call for full citizenship with dignity. I was doing an event in North Carolina. A lot happened in North Carolina. And a few years ago, and I was talking about immigration reform and the fact that my life was limited by pieces of papers. This elderly woman, black woman, came up afterwards. And then she kind of grabbed me, and then she had this purse. She pulled this piece of paper from her purse. It was a really old piece of paper. She took it out, and then she said, "Young man, when my great-great-grandmother landed in Charleston, South Carolina, she was given this piece of paper. It was a bill of sale. I'd never seen one before. Saying that her great-great-grandmother was a slave." And then she goes, "Young man, can you connect the piece of paper that my great-great-grandmother got to the pieces of papers that you and your people can't seem to get? It's not about papers, young man. And it's not about immigration reform. Think bigger." She was absolutely right. So as we discuss immigration, we cannot divorce it from who this country has considered to be citizens historically. And we cannot remove it from this really, really hard and uncomfortable and difficult conversation about race. We cannot do that. And I would argue that the very thing that we're arguing about, who can be a citizen and what constitutes citizenship, is actually what will unite us together as one people in one country. I would also argue that undocumented immigrants in this country actually prove to us what citizenship is. And by that, let me ask this question. How many people here are U.S. citizens? Can you raise your hand? Amazing! I hope you don't take it for granted. I hope you realize that there are millions of people who are fighting for something that you may just happen to be born with, right? And I would hope that undocumented immigrants in this country remember that what actually makes us most American is the fact that we are a part of the struggle for full equality that this country continues to strive for, and I would hope should always continue to strive for. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much. That was brilliant. And it really is. I remember the very first time that I read the article in the New York Times and I went to attend your screening in New York City. You probably don't remember, but I was like, you've got to come to Rutgers Newark. They're going to love to hear from you. And I mean, what I want to do briefly, because I know I just have 5 minutes, is just, first of all, to recall, I think maybe the reason that Rose asked me to be here is because I was working here in 2006 when a student came into my office, Sharon Nyanteki, she's a Ghanaian honors political science student, and she told me the story of, in the midst of her adjustment of status hearing, she'd been married and she was ready to get her green card. She was chained and thrown into the back of a van and detained in Middlesex County Jail for 21 days. And no one knew where she was. And she came to my office afterward, and we were in the midst of creating the Immigrant Rights Collective. And so I'm really glad to meet the current president of the Immigrant Rights Collective. And I told Rose when I met her, you know, you are the faculty member that we were dreaming about in the law school. So it really is just so amazing to see this happening here and to have you here. The main thing I wanted to ask you, and I think I asked you this in New York when you showed your video, but this document is exciting for me because I teach a course in Race, Nation, and Borders in American literature. And it really is asking exactly the question that I think that you've been doing through your work as an activist and through your work as a writer. How do we need to redefine American? What is American? Especially in a post-1965 moment when you know, I work in Latino studies. We're always reminding everyone that by 2040, more people will trace their origins to Latin America than to the United States. And moreover, as you point out in your book, the fastest growing undocumented immigrant population is Asian American. So it just, the whole demographics has changed radically, and it means that we have to think beyond a black-white binary, and we have to redefine those master narratives. I was impressed that because of the way you framed the problem of the master narrative, you refused the temptation or even the imposition to set up model minorities over and against bad migrants or socially undesirable migrants. You refused that dichotomous way of thinking. And you also, the question that I asked you was actually about how you use the metaphor of coming out to talk about the immigrant rights situation. And for me, the question was really about how coming out as gay described the dramatic and courageous decision to come out as an undocumented immigrant in the pages of the New Yorker. I was trying to understand, and I think you explained really well in the book, how coming out provided you with spiritual and intellectual resources. And then you make the turn to American literature, and of course these are all the books that I'll be teaching in my class in the spring, along with your book. You know, James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, Amy Tan, Carlos Buzan, Sandra Cisneros, all of whom are in that project of redefining American. So my question to you is, first of all, why is Rutgers Newark not a Define American chapter, whereas Rutgers New Brunswick is? So that's one question. And then the other, it's a not so savory question, and I think you do touch on it in the book. I feel like you've developed it. Because in some of the research that I've done, especially work on the 19th century, I'm really thinking not about sort of the Dear America that you write a letter to as you would write to a beloved, but rather the US empire that's played this decided role in displacing migrants through occupation, military aid, and other forms of economic and political imposition. Since the late 19th century, but even earlier, you know, we acquired the northern half of Mexico, right, through a war of conquest. Above all in the Philippines. I mean, some of the research I was doing in the Peace Collection at Swarthmore College turned up that it was in the Philippines that the waterboarding was first developed and used extensively. So that whole use of torture in imperial projects has to be central to the narrative of thinking about how to reconcile with the past. I mean, the only other thing I want to say is that I feel like your essay, which is so exquisitely written, demonstrates the urgent need to defend investigative journalism. It's a meditative, fearless, self-reflexive, soul-searching, fact-checked account. And it meant, I love the fact that you define freedom, writing as freedom. And that's going to be such a great way to get my students to learn to write. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Lomas, for those valuable remarks. So for my remarks, I just wanted to spend a few minutes responding to two questions that the book raised for me and I think for many of you. Those two concepts and questions focus on citizenship and American. So first, what does it mean to be an American? And second, what does it mean to be a citizen? Let me first address the first question. What does it mean to be an American? The center actually sponsored a book giveaway to encourage students to read the book and also to hear responses on the question of what it means to be an American. So let me share with you two responses that we received. First, no one is an American because it is easy. To be an American, documented or not, immigrant or multi-generational, is to hold an inherent and immutable belief that life can and will be better, often through sacrifice and leaping into the unknown. That's one response. Here's a second response. Being an American means continuously striving for a better country and a better society. This country was founded through a revolution by men who sought to improve the condition of their society. And as time passed, powerful figures have fought for a more equitable society. From abolitionists to suffragists to freedom riders, Americans have struggled to redefine what it means to be an American. They have fought to make America more inclusive to women, people of color, and immigrants, and others. At every step of the way, we have fought to make the country a better place for those that come after us. The first response suggests that to be an American is to be hopeful. The second response describes an American as someone who is inclusive. In the book, I see Jose's memoir highlighting those two views of what it means to be an American, full of hope and inclusive, as important goals to aspire towards. To not forget that those are important ideals that we should continue to strive upon. And it's especially important today as anti-immigration policies have been passed, denying asylum to people coming to our borders to seek a better life, limiting the number of refugees who can come to the United States, proposing to repeal birthright citizenship. It's important to continue to be the kind of American that Jose encourages us to be. Let me now turn to the second concept, citizenship. Jose uses the term undocumented citizen, which, as he explained earlier, was fitting for this lecture. One student described it as provocative. It's a provocative title. The terms undocumented and citizen might, at the outset, be thought of as inherently at odds with each other. On the one hand, undocumented suggests a person who does not belong, right? Unauthorized, not lawfully present, illegal, right? We often hear, what about illegal do you not understand? On the other hand, the term citizen suggests that a person belongs. They are a member of the American polity. So therefore, people might say undocumented citizens, those terms are in tension with each other. But I don't think so. The two are necessarily not in tension with each other. And here I turn to one of my colleagues, Linda Bosniak, who has written about citizenship and 4 ways of thinking about citizenship. One way is to think about it in the formal sense. Most of you are U.S. citizens. We're all formally U.S. citizens, either by birth or by naturalization. That would be me. The second considers citizenship to mean the entitlement to and enjoyment of rights. From this perspective, citizenship focuses less on formal status and more on the enjoyment of rights and privileges. Third, citizenship stands in relation to one's participation in democratic self-government. Citizenship refers to one's ability to participate actively in the political process. And fourth meaning of citizenship is that it refers to the sense of belonging, one's emotional ties to community. So think about those 4 meanings of citizenship. One that you're attached to, but you're not, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're only attached to one, right? You can certainly ascribe to all 4 meanings of citizenship. In Jose's case, he is not a formal citizen. We're not sure whether he would have a path to formal citizenship, but as someone who grew up in the United States, he is entitled to certain rights, including the right to equal protection and due process. He's able to participate in the political process. The book talks about how he was in the Republican Party convention, and he got kicked out. And he certainly feels like he belongs. He's emotionally tied to the American community. So he might not be a formal citizen, but he is a citizen regardless of his status. The challenge for us, in my mind, is how to support undocumented citizens. How can we become allies? What can be done? How might we create a safe haven, a sanctuary within Rutgers University? Right? How can we create a better and safe haven, safer community within Newark? And what about New Jersey? New Jersey became there was a blue wave that rode over New Jersey. Maybe this is the time. Maybe New Jersey can be a sanctuary state just like California. Overall, Jose's book reminds us that there remains much work to be done, and particularly in the area of immigration and citizenship law, and in shaping who should be an American and a citizen. We'll open the floor now to questions and answers by our speaker. But before that, Jose, if you could come here. Let me give you this plaque.
Oh, there's a plaque.
There's a plaque. Okay, the floor is open.
Can I say something though before you open the floor? Because I wanted to make sure I spoke for 18 minutes. I made the time.
You have a timekeeper.
Because you all mentioned the master narrative, so let's talk a little bit about that. Let's unpack that a little bit. The first book I read that really confused me and challenged me and I loved was The Bluest by Toni Morrison. I don't know if y'all, how many people have read the book, The Bluest Eye? So I was assigned to read it in 8th grade because my teacher was amazing and crazy. I assigned a bunch of 8th graders this book. And I read it, and the book, if you don't know about it, the book is about this young black girl, Nicola, who wanted blue eyes. She believed that she needed blue eyes to be more beautiful and acceptable. So for a Filipino who's neither white nor black, this was very confusing to me. Now in the Philippines, we know about colorism, like I'm considered mestizo, right? And I'm lighter skinned. But I didn't know anything about black or white. So back then, there was, again, no internet. So at the library, they had this thing called microfiche. You know what those are? So I spent like, Giancarlo, what a millennial. So like, is this thing, it's like a big ass machine, and you research and you read like old magazine and newspaper clips on it, right? So I remember one weekend, I spent the whole weekend trying to find articles about Toni Morrison and The Bluest Eye, and she said, finally found this article, and she said that she wrote the book to show what happens when someone, in this case, a young black girl, surrenders to the master narrative. It's like, what's that? Then she explains it. The master narrative is that young black girl thinking that to be having blue eyes and blonde hair was beautiful. The master narrative is surrendering to this thing that you don't control. A year later, when I was a freshman in high school, I found out that I was gay and I was undocumented. And what I wanted to do, influenced by that book, was to not surrender to what an illegal and faggot was supposed to be. So again, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's so quintessentially American that a black woman would free an undocumented gay Filipino, but that's exactly what she did. And so I think what we're living through together now is how do we recreate the master narrative of what citizenship is supposed to mean. As a political reporter, which I was previously, I can tell you right now that it's very, very smart of Donald Trump to use birthright citizenship as an issue. If anything, he will use it to get reelected. Never mind that it's unconstitutional. Never mind that the Washington Post and the New York Times and NPR can do everything they do to say that he cannot do it. But guess what? The New York Times doesn't matter anymore. Neither does the Washington Post, and neither does NPR. Nothing they say matters to the people who support Donald Trump. So where are we? Right? Like, where does connection fit in all of that? So, I wanted to say that before we get to questions. I know I just threw a lot at you, but I just think you should know that. Okay, questions?
Comments?
Yes.
Hi. I just want to ask you, how do you overcome when you go to not this? I understand that you are in different places, and not everyone is a friendly public. So I would like to know, how do you overcome, or do you get the energy to speak up about your situation? Because from my own experience, I haven't had the value to talk. There are lots of people who say, you're in a meeting, somebody comes with a hat that says "Make America Great Again," you feel threatened, and I just want to know how do you get the energy?
I have a little bit of a cop-out answer. Because, you know, this was my luck of discovering journalism as early as I did, right? I've been a journalist since I was 17 years old. And as a journalist, I was trained to talk to everyone. I was trained to I care less about what you think. I care more about why you think what you think. So I'm always trying to interrogate, right? So when people actually want to detain me or deport me, I want to go talk to them more. Because I kind of really want to understand. And, you know, in my head, I have to hold on to this thing where, you actually think you're worth more of a human being than I am? Because I don't want to have that conversation with you. I don't want to have this thing where I have to put my resume up and say, okay, so there's my resume, where's yours? Whose is better? Do you really want to do that? No. And yet, when I talk to people, you know, and they say, like, a lot of people want us detained and deported, they're like, oh, they don't love America. They don't really want to be here. How do you know that? I'm skipping something. When I made this film called White People for MTV a few years ago. Frankly, for me, it was my own way of getting out of this box, because now I'm like a walking immigration reform person, right? It's like, I'm just an undocumented person. Like, for people, they don't even want to know that I'm a writer or I'm a filmmaker, and it doesn't matter, I'm just undocumented, right? So I made this film that was so not about immigration, and yet it kind of is about immigration. I made it because I was at the University of Georgia in Athens. I was doing an event with the college Republicans, because that's what I do. And this young man who was the president, you know how people of color, we always get asked where we're from? Yeah. So I've gotten into this habit now of asking white people where they're from. So I was like, hey, where are you from? His name was Robert. He goes, oh, I'm American. I know, but where are you from? White. But listen, white is not a country. So where are you from? And then you know what happens when people like kind of take their guard down? And I don't know. Oh, you don't know. I was astounded by that. Because how can you not know? Right? How can you not know where you're from? And then he says, well, you know, we're just here. I'm like, oh, okay, we've been here for a while. Like, oh, I know, but like... So then I started thinking, I wonder how many young white people, at a time when the country's getting less and less white, I wonder how they figure this out. So that's why I made White People. And so then when we made the film, we did a study with MTV. Define American teamed up with MTV and found out this incredible study. It was about 1,000 people were surveyed. According to this study, 75% of white people live in predominantly white towns, meaning they don't live in Newark. 75% of white people. Have you been to Iowa, Wisconsin, Montana? And by the way, when people tell me that the country's overpopulated, I'm like, clearly you have not been to Montana. The country is not overpopulated. So, 75% of white people. And then here's the other statistic that I thought was really incredible. 90% of white people have predominantly white friends. And no amount of listening to Drake, Rihanna, or Beyonce changes that. Right? They're not your friends. You just listen to them. So think about that. If you're one of those white people that live in predominantly white town and have predominantly white friends, how do you interact with people of color and immigrants? What television tells you, what movies you watch, and what people say. No wonder we are where we are, right? Like when I was in the South, I spent a lot of time in the South because I find the South, maybe because I'm a big William Faulkner fan, the past is never the past, it's just really here. And the South, I was in Mississippi. In the state of Mississippi, I don't know if you all know this, in the state of Mississippi, they stopped teaching the Civil War after 3rd grade. In the state of Mississippi, like the Confederate flag is still on the state flag. In the state of Mississippi in 2018, right? So I was really struck by the fact that in the South, a lot of people watch Fox News, not because they like Fox News, they watch Fox News because it comes with a cable package that gives them Sunday football. And you know, football is like religion. I was really struck by that because I just assume people want to watch Sean Hannity, you know? They don't. They actually just watch it because he comes from football. And because if they watch him, all they hear about us is what he says about us, right? So I was really, really struck by that. And so when I go to people, I make an assumption that they're actually not even talking about me at all. I kind of remove myself from it because I'm like, I think that all the anger, because you know, on social media, people are just really angry, and I kind of just want to hug them. I'm like, oh, what happened? What happened to you? You know? So I approach it from that perspective. Because here's what's not going to happen. You're not going to take away my power, and you're not going to take away my grace. I was raised to be graceful. And I'm not going to lose that to you. Right? I'm not going to do that. I was not raised like that. Certainly Toni Morrison did not raise me like that. Right? All those years. Right? So that's why I don't. And I do this a lot, by the way. I'm about to start a new project, specifically on straight white men. So they're really going to deport me after that. Because I love straight white guys. You're wonderful people. Some of them. And I really want to understand what it's like to be a straight white man in America today. I don't think we can afford to exclude them from the conversation. I don't think we can. Did you know that in terms of suicide rates, like one of the highest suicide rates in this country are actually among straight white men? Why? So again, why? So that's why I do what I do. I have a lot of whys. Any other questions? Yes. Oh, there's one.
May I suggest you take 2 or 3 at a time so that...
Great.
Yes.
You're going to pick because... Okay, awesome. She's going to pick. Thank you.
You mentioned something that got me thinking about this panel James Baldwin did in 1963, and he talked about white consciousness, and that the problem persists with the ability of white people to identify as white, and that's important to them. So given everything you talked about today, the problem we have now, what do you think is the next step in trying to break down this white consciousness? You just mentioned your film, but also as far as trying to, you know, get rid of the problem, like actually stop it for good.
Can I answer that by itself? This is kind of big. In Baldwin, you know, that's why the title is Notes of an Undocumented Citizen. That's directly from Notes of a Son. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's on YouTube. I've seen all these videos. They're all on YouTube. YouTube is amazing. See, when I made White People, I remember how much criticism I was getting from friends, most of them were people of color, who were upset with me without having seen what I was doing. Because they thought, why are you centering them again? Why are you making it about them? It's time for us to do... And it was hard because, you know, I can take all the criticism from people who hate me, even though they don't know how to hate me. But to take criticism from people who love you is always hard, right? And I said, well, you know, I have just gone all around the country and I've met all these white people who don't even know what they are. And I just kind of want to understand it. And that was my reasoning, right? And you know, what was extraordinary going through that process, and now having become like a whiteness expert. Not like Tim Weiss. Tim and I are very different, the way we do our work. But I don't know how fair it is to ask people of color to have to carry all that weight around. The question for me now becomes, what kind of work are white people really want to engage in deconstructing what it is, right? I actually have a thing in the book that I didn't read because I was going by 18 minutes. This is probably one of the hardest things I had to write in the book, what I was talking about in this chapter called The Master Narrative. I'm going to quote from the book. Understanding the experience of black people in America, why black was created so people could be white. Prying open how Latinos, Asians, Native Americans, and other marginalized groups have been historically oppressed through laws and systems that had little or nothing to do with what was right. White as the default, white as the center, white as the norm, is the central part of the master narrative. The centrality of whiteness, how it constructed white versus black, illegal versus legal, hurts not only people of color who aren't white, but also white people who can't carry the burden of what they've constructed. I had a really hard time writing that because I kept thinking of all those conservative white people I had met and how they were going to process that. And then I kept thinking, okay, regardless of what you think I have deducted through all of my experiences, and I've made an effort to try to experience as much as I can, that this weight that white people have to carry not only really hurts us, but really hurts white people too. And I think part of the solution is white people actually declaring independence from whiteness as an ideology, right? And claiming what they were before. I actually think that's the path forward for all of us. You weren't white, you were German, you were Irish, you were Italian. Do you know what the Irish went through? I'm obsessed with that right now. Do you know what happened when they got here on those coffin ships? How there were like signs that said no Irish need apply in newspapers all across the country? How dare you, as an Irishman, have no empathy for Mexicans, Salvadorans, and Haitians, right? I think that has to be part of this reclamation that we got to do. I would argue we've never really had this in this country. I think we are going through something completely unprecedented. And you know what's even worse about that? There's no James Baldwin. You know, I keep wanting like a figure like Baldwin to kind of provide clarity, you know, and provide hope and optimism instead of just all the pessimism. I had this really interesting conversation. Well, that's a whole other thing that I can't say publicly. But yeah. Okay, other questions? She's picking. I hope that was sufficient.
All right, so 2 to 3 at a time.
Yes.
Sure. Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for putting out that message that so many people that become successful and have a voice kind of don't dare to because they feel like they might be rejected. By bringing that out, so thank you for giving us a voice on one. I was an undocumented immigrant until May, and in May when I got my residency, I applied for law school. And now I'm in Camden. Next year I'm coming to New York because I'm closer. But my question is, have you seen any progress? You going into like the math of the beast, like they say, you're going into these Republican events and things like that. Do you notice a change after you speak? Do people approach you and tell you, wow, that thing that you said really got to me and kind of changed my mentality? Because I feel like that's the most important thing. I've seen a lot of resistance in that aspect. Like when I speak to people, they say, well, if you don't like American history or how we did things, then why are you here? That's a lot of, they encapsulate that a lot. If you don't like how we, sent the CIA into Nicaragua and did all this stuff that now made it such a tough place to live, then why are you here? You know, if you want to be part of us, the bad people kind of thing. So how do you, what do you see? Like, do you see people, I mean, it's like a faith thing. Do you still have faith in that this is actually going to affect people? I mean, I've seen it. I have friends, I have a lot of white friends that when I got to this country, I barely spoke English. And by me being, I guess I'm social enough and I was able to communicate enough that they got to know me and they knew my story and they realized that it's, you know, it's admirable to come to a country where you hardly speak the language, and you know, it takes a lot of positive qualities to do that. Okay, not everybody sees that, so
I totally get that. That's one question. I'm following you, Rose. I'm following you. Oh, you're going to set the Divine American chapter here? Is that what you're doing?
No.
No.
I go to New Brunswick.
Volunteering there. I was like,
But I do have a question. So the title, Notes of an Undocumented Citizen, and that word really struck to me because I've been put in a situation since I was 9. I knew I was undocumented. I knew my parents fled Venezuela because we were middle-class age citizen. The Chavez regime was coming after us. You know, we were targeted, so my parents fled. So I knew from a very young age that I did not belong here. And I'm stuck in this ideology, and I wanted to ask you, it's like the sense of belonging. To me, belonging to this country means becoming a green card holder and then becoming a citizen. So I talk to a lot of dreamers and a lot of undocumented people that say, well, I belong here, but that's not my narrative. Like, to me, I don't belong, and it's been made very clear. So it's like, how do you construct the ideology, or how do you are able to change that into like, I belong in this space, I can take part of this space, when since I was 9, I was told like, you're too brown, you speak funny, you eat funny. So like you, I had to change my accent. I don't have an accent because from 9 years old, I was targeted. So I was like, I need to change, I need to hide. But I don't belong, and that's my feeling. So it's like, how do you change that, or have you come across other undocumented people that feel like they don't belong? So how do you change that narrative to be like, one day, for me, would be to say like, I belong here, I'm American, whether I become a citizen or not.
Great. Third question. What is the mic? You're next, ma'am. I see you.
Hi, I'm actually here. I'm representing the Filipino Student Association.
Oh, cool.
And speaking from a perspective that's very, very, very far away from this topic, me being a like how you mentioned the targeting of natural born citizen. I was born here, and the way that basically my question is, me being seen, even me being quote unquote American, like what do you say to like Filipino American kids in this country that were even born here, that were told that, you know, they were different, just like her, who experienced things where they were told from a young age, even at school, that you sound different, you look different, the things that you do are different, and therefore you feel this sort of thing of a different sense of undesirable. I'm sorry if this question is very...
No. Okay, so okay, good. Your questions are kind of connected, so let me go through that first before I go to the third one. And this is, again, was my luck of discovering Toni Morrison as early as I did, because, so that was 8th grade. So by freshman year, Baldwin, Langston Hughes, Ellison, Dunbar, the poet Dunbar, and like learning and reading Black people's experiences, it kind of opened up a whole new America to me, right? In which I didn't feel, from the very beginning, I thought that America was this place that you had to fight for something because you're not going to be a part of it, right? Like I was saying, there was a private meeting before this whole event, and when I was writing my book, I had this Morrison quote on top of my computer. Her quote was, I stood at, the quote is about, she was asked, can you build an entire literary career writing about Black people? Is that enough? When are you going to write about white people? Because, you know, white people, that's the mainstream, right? And so, like, why just focus on Sula? And, you know, Sula and Tar Baby and Beloved and all these things are about black people. So Toni Morrison said to this white woman, the interviewer, she said, I stood at the border, stood at the edge, and claimed it as central, and forced the world to move to where I was. That was important for me to remember, so I didn't write the book as if I'm explaining myself to someone else, or trying to convince someone that I was worthy. I wrote the book because I'm really messed up. I'm like mentally not healthy. I'm depressed. I'm psychologically broken, and I wanted to understand why. That's why I wrote the book. So this sense of belonging, to me, I think is defined by the frame of mind. Now, one answer is, I came from a community in which I belonged in my community. Something really weird happened a few months ago. The school district that I attended as a kid decided to name an elementary school after me, which is bananas. It's a public school, Jose Antonio Vargas Elementary School. It opens in August, K to 5th. But I'm saying this because I kept waiting for someone to speak up and say, oh, hell no. This person is not even, this person is deportable. Why are we in the name? How do you explain to a kindergartner that a school is named that he's going to go to is named after this illegal alien who's also gay? Right? I kept waiting. The pessimist in me was like, someone was going to say, oh, no, you can't do this. And I kept saying, shouldn't I be dead? Shouldn't somebody like kill me first before this happens? And then you know what I realized? I realized that whatever you may think of me, no one could deny that I'm from Mountain View, California. That's where I'm from. Even if you didn't like me for whatever reason you have, you couldn't deny that I'm from that place and I belonged in that place. That's why they named the school after me. So I think this idea of belonging, it has to come internally. It cannot come externally. I really feel strongly about that. That's why even the Filipino food movement right now, my friend Nicole Fonseca's book, I Am Filipino, is about to come out. She's amazing. I wrote the foreword. But the book is so important because she, instead of calling the dishes, the Filipino dishes, and giving them like whitewash names, like chocolate meat, which is like this dark thing that we have, she called it dinuguan, she called it kare-kare, she called it palabo, and she didn't have to translate it to people. Claiming ourselves as central, to me, is part of the belonging. Right? I remember when I was reading Morrison early on, she actually said that she knew as a young black woman that she stood in a higher moral plateau. That all these laws that said that black people couldn't do stuff, that was totally immoral and totally not right. And all those people who believed that those were the law, was morally inferior. So all these people that think that we need pieces of papers and laws, I think they're morally inferior. I think their heads are all boarded up. There's a bunch of walls up in their heads. Right? But that was given to me by people who made me believe that freedom was actually here, right? And not what other people give me. Does that make sense? Okay, the faith question. It really depends. Like there are some people, they like facts, so when I say that I paid so much taxes, I should be a Republican, they're totally aghast. I was in Nebraska at some event at Chamber of Commerce, and they're like, you pay taxes? How do you pay taxes? I don't know, the IRS wants it. And then I actually did this thing, because we had this computer. I went to the ITIN number website, the individual tax ID number, which was put on the IRS website in 1996 during the Clinton administration, and it clearly stated that if you are not here legally and you want to pay taxes, this is how you should pay it. So wait, the same government that wants to deport us also puts a website that says, oh, we know you're here illegally, but go pay taxes. What the hell is that? And then the Nebraska people were like, Mr. Vargas, you should sue the government. This is taxation. So the very guy who was like, deport you now, the moment I said, and the moment I showed like a tax, I wrote a check to the government for like $45,000 for taxes, because I was making money and I paid the government $45,000. Now, I'm privileged enough that I can write one check for $45,000. And I wrote to the Department of Treasury in my Bank of America card, And they, like all the Republicans in the audience like lost their minds. They're like, what? You should sue the government. No, like I just don't want them to deport me. You know what I mean? But you know, I'm starting to think about this. There's a lot of lawyers here. Like, could undocumented workers actually file a case against the government and saying, wait, you can't take our money if you won't recognize us? Is that something? I don't know. It's like, I don't know. Hey, I'm just spitballing here, trying to figure out what's up. Hi, yeah. She's Filipino over there.
Yeah. Hi, how are
I saw her
you?
light up when I started talking about.
I just wanted to say kudos, Jose, for being such a strong voice for the LGBT and immigrant community and so many more. And Ronald and Rose and Laura for hosting this event, especially during a time where human rights is severely threatened. So I work at Barclays Investment Bank and also here with colleagues from the
Philippines.
I'm really nice, I promise. I also know Nicole as well. So I was supposed to open up a Pennsylvania with her in Brooklyn.
Oh,
but,
awesome.
Yeah, so her book actually already came out.
Yeah. Oh, is it out now?
It is, yeah, it came out in October.
What was today? Well, I'm so sorry. I am so screwed up in my head. I thought it was still the 8th. Okay, it's the 14th. Okay, great. Yeah.
Maybe you could swap books.
Yeah.
But I'm here with colleagues from the Philippines-focused remittance blockchain called SendFriend, and both companies share the same mission for corporate social responsibility, for diversity of thought and human rights. And you know, one of the diversity networks that I lead at Barclays supports a nonprofit called Safe Passage Project, which offers translation services and pro bono legal services to children who are going through the documentation process alone. And so just wanted to circle back with kind of what speaks to Rutgers Law School and what nonprofits you support and nonprofits you support as well individually, I would say.
The nonprofits I support, right?
Yes.
So that's one question. Should I keep going?
I think we have room for just one more.
Oh, one more. I have can I promise, because you know, your hands have been up, so you're the next one. Okay, so let me answer that. There's a lot, but let me start with, well, the Dream.us is a big one for me just because they provide scholarships for undocumented students. I'm on the advisory board, and you know, right now in this country, I don't know if you all know this, but in the state of North Carolina, undocumented students can't go to community colleges. In the state of Georgia, undocumented students can't go to the public schools, only to the private ones. Any minute now, they're going to take away DACA. I'm pretty, you know, I'm sorry to say that, but any minute now, I think the Trump administration is going to do everything they can to take DACA away. And I think to get really creative around how we support undocumented students at all levels, especially at the community college level, I think is really important. So the Dream.us to me is important. There's a group that we do a lot of work with called the UndocuBlack Network, UndocuBlack. We do a lot of work with them because I think it's really, really important that we bridge the divide between, not even the divide, but like we connect the dots between mass incarceration and mass detention. Right? I just did an event with Michelle Alexander last week at Columbia. And we're doing a whole thing about mass criminalization in general. So people, like, you know, in the book I wrote about being detained in Texas. So when I was detained, it was only 8 hours, but I was in a jail cell. It's not a detention center, it's a jail cell, right? And then the last thing I would say is a group called the Pillars Fund. Pillars, P-I-L-L-A-R-S Fund, and it's all about Muslim representation. So how do we make sure that Muslims are represented in accurate and humane ways in all forms of media? So that's probably the top 3 places I would go to.
Thank you.
Yeah. Last question. Yeah.
I would like to think this is like a really simple question.
Yeah.
But for yourself, like I'm the child of immigrants. My parents came from the Dominican Republic. They've been here 30 years, but they don't know like English. But like for those people, since you're going on a book tour, do you see yourself as like a political figure and educator? Because like for those people who, I assume like you probably met people who have never met a black person. Like I remember meeting people from Wisconsin. They're like, "You're Hispanic. You're not exactly how we imagine you." So. You see yourself in that way?
I was just in oh gosh, what was the place? I was right outside of Boston last night, and I was helping out this interfaith coalition organization that's fundraising for sanctuary policies. And it was a room full of maybe 150 people. There was a young black woman, ended up being Dominican, who's Dominican. But in the conversation, one of the organizers of the group started talking about how new immigrants in this country need to learn how to assimilate in the way that the Irish and the Italians assimilated to Boston generations ago. Well, you know what was incredible? As we were sitting with that uncomfortability of what he just said, out of 150 people, 150, there were like 7 people of color and the Dominican woman, right? And I could see that she was seething. Deidre was her name. So she spoke up. She said, oh, when we say assimilation, like, what do we really mean, right? But you know what though? I love the way she said it. She said it in such a way that wasn't accusatory, in a way that was like, let's just be careful that when we say that, we're trying to be as inclusive as possible. Afterwards, I spoke to her and I'm like, how old are you? Oh, she was 23. So the fact that she spoke up to actually one of the people who organized the event and said it in such a graceful way while keeping her composure and making sure she was being heard, to me was so inspiring, right? And that was an example of what happens when we're trying to complicate narratives. And then I started thinking as we were driving out, because it was like a 2-hour event after I was being driven back to the hotel. And I started thinking, man, like, how hard it must be for all these older people, you know? All they ever thought was America was a melting pot, you know? Like all these things that we have taught them in school about assimilation. All of that now is being challenged. And then I started thinking how much humility that takes for this two-way street to happen, for actual conversations to happen. So when things get uncomfortable, how do you make sure you don't walk out? When someone says something that triggers you or you find problematic, do you keep talking or do you just shut down and walk out? I guess what I'm trying to say to you is, I'm hoping that if I can make it in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, right, and talk to people who want me detained and deported, I think you can afford to stay for a little longer in that 10-minute conversation with your uncle while he spews that thing about the illegal people. I think we all need to get a little bit more comfortable. I think we have to risk more, right? In whatever way we can. And that's an unfair, that's not, by the way, that's not equal for everybody. There are a lot of people in this room who, just because of the color of your skin or your gender, you're already risking something without even saying anything, right? So it's a different kind of risk that each of us, I think, have to take. But I think that willingness to take a risk, that willingness to, when people talk to me about privilege, I think, you know, we all hold some sort of privilege. I think the question becomes, what are you doing to risk whatever that privilege is? I think that is a place where we find some sort of justice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being here. We have cookies and wine outside, and Jose will sign books for you. And we have a few books left to sell, $20 cash only. Thank you for being here.